Well, hello, I am Radagast, and this show is going to be called Do You Know Mimi? As I've been working to put together, my kind of opus to try and free us from the paratrix or the patrix, which are other names for the falsely accused matrix, which comes from Mother or Mother Nature. Again, the inversion and the substitutions for what is wholesome with what is ransom is a big part of the trick being played on us, the trick to own us when we are part of creation of the Creator, and those who would own our labor, our thought processes, our beliefs. I mean, it's a form of total control. It's been happening for millennia and centuries, and so that is ultimately what I'm trying to do, is a series of videos to help us stop being ignorant of who we are, because evil ultimately comes from ignorance. And if we don't know who we are, we can't tap into our essence, and strange beliefs can fill into us and make us do things that we would not be able to do if we were aligned with the love that is the Creator. So Mimi. So as I'm doing a lot of research, and that research involves reading books and also listening to people who have written books and are scholars in their field. Because can I see this without my glasses? Maybe not. Basically, there's kind of two, to me, there's the alien, which is part of the parasitic energy, and then there's the natural, or Mother Nature versus the aliens. And so, but when we kind of get into where we come from and what has happened to us, people like Graham Hancock have coined a phrase that we are a species with amnesia. Part of that amnesia has been climatic traumas, and how those came about could be another topic of discussion, and then of course the traumas of people with belief systems creating thought crimes. Like I might have said it before, the word heresy comes from a Greek word that is very similar in sounding. I think it's spelled Heresei, and it originally means to choose, making a choice about what you believe. And then when you get a system that wants to own you, well, then choices become against the law, sometimes with very severe and sometimes ultimate penalties for thinking the wrong thing, or at least speaking it. And if you can't speak what you believe, that's dictatorship. That's tyranny. So often when we're there's kind of, we have the more simple biblical narratives, and then we get into what I call the more complex, but still kind of tied into biblical narratives of the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki and the biblical narratives are very tied together. There's, familial things, there's similar stories, and even when it comes to Nephilim and fallen angels and a lot of terms we're familiar with from biblical sources. Excuse me, let me mute my mic while I do this. We kind of see that is one narrative. And then we have an older, what in modern terms gets called Gnostic. All right, now Gnostic is really a term that was applied to people who believed in gnosis or direct communication with our Creator, instead of somebody, usually a male, revealing what the Creator said to them, and then that becomes the law. But one of the problems, and one of the things I'm trying to do, is that to me the Gnostic or Sophian or nature-based narrative is doing a dance with the Anunnaki narrative, and I'm doing my best to do enough research to parse that out. Now, this is about something I learned. Now, there's a man who's written a number of books, and he has a website that's called the Rune Soup. Rune, as in the runes, R-U-N-E. But his name is Gordon White, and I discovered him on Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio YouTube channel. But he's done a number of really great interviews with Greg Harwood of the Higher Side Chats. So underneath this video, I will be listing some of those, because there is some fantastic stuff there. And ultimately, what I do when I listen to people, I'm listening to the data they're giving, and I listen to their interpretation, but I'm really looking for the data. I'll do my own interpretation. And I would ask anybody who, even as you're getting data interpretation from me, you do your own interpretation. Because you can't be sovereign unless you are standing in what you have done, the work you have done for yourself, and your own personal gnosis, your own personal knowing. And your own personal knowing should be checking in with your heart, which is your direct line to the love that is the Creator. So let me just look at my notes a little bit. Originally, the name of this, I was working with this, and it's going to be, we will find common cause in wisdom. And of course, the Greek word for wisdom is Sophia. So we could say we could find common cause in Sophia, but wisdom is a word we all can grok, to take a Heinlein word from Stranger in a Strange Land. And I want to say hello to all the new subscribers, all my subscribers, and just one subscriber who says she loves to wake up, I believe it's a woman, to wake up and have her coffee to a video that I've made. And since it's currently 4:30 in the morning, by the time I have this uploaded, it should be available for my coffee drinking subscriber. So back to this. So have you heard of Mimi? So I'm listening to Gordon White, and his research is quite exhaustive and very fascinating because of where his mind is at. And he mentioned a virus named Mimi. And let me just kind of get that one up. And I'm like, whoa. And the reason I had even one of the reasons I selected it is because the term in the description of the Higher Side Chat was a term, panspermia. Now, to me, the most eloquent and best research of the true Sophian narrative that is currently called Gnostic. But for me, what we know of the Gnostics is from the Christian fathers who were speaking of them as the heretics or their heresies. And here comes that thought crime again. And then later on, the Nag Hammadi codexes, which are kind of written in Coptic. So they're, and they were around, in Egypt. And they are basically from the 1st and 2nd century in the Common Era. And in them we see this strange mishmash of the ancient wisdom dealing with the fact that they're now in an environment where there is such a thing as heresy or thought crime, and trying to come to grips. And so it's this really strange mishmash of what was the wisdom of many thousands of years. And I'm going to provide some stuff here that will be maybe a little eye-opening and take us past what is normally thought of as Gnostic, as, again, the first century of the Common Era, and placing it back at least 35,000 years. And John Lash definitely speaks to that. He speaks to it minimally a Neolithic thought process. And Gordon White also does a lot in explaining about these people and how they thought. And we have Göbekli Tepe, in Turkey, what's now Turkey. It used to be part of Greater Armenia. But that's another sad story. But how the imagery that's used there, how it was used, and the fact that the people who built this actually, and even in places like Stonehenge, they were building things like this before they were building themselves permanent dwellings to live in. So they thought it was more important to build these things, which were kind of communication devices to other intelligences, than to build homes for themselves. So in many ways, we could say that they were hunter-gatherers, and places like Göbekli Tepe was a gathering place. So he used their term panspermia. Panspermia was a term brought in by John Lash with how life got seeded into our galaxy, and I'm quite sure the same process pertains to other galaxies, in that the intelligence of our galaxy, which is a localized intelligence of the great Tao, because the Tao is unknowable. The Native Americans called it the Great Mystery, as opposed to the Great Spirit. Great Spirit is knowable, the Great Mystery is not. The Tao is not knowable, but there are other step-downs or fractals of that we see. And if we look into a long-range Hubble telescope, which some people think is fake, but our ancestors obviously didn't have that, and they had clear night skies. And that's another. I don't want to get myself distracted here. So the concept is that the Godhead, okay, the creator of the localized intelligence in our galaxy, with its various emanations, which in the Gnostic terms are called aeons, which are separate intelligences, and they kind of from the one, pairs get brought out, which are called syzygies. And the yin-yang symbol is a perfect example of a syzygy, in that even though it's broken into two, it's still in the one, and hidden in that circle before the partition is the one, which is why almost all systems work around a trinity, because there's the primal one and then the first syzygy, which results into three. Once it is beyond one, you have three, and then there's multiples after that. But the first movement is to create the first pairing from the one, and then we have three. And I could go off into the Tridosha system of the Vedas, which is another great source of wisdom, but we're going to try and keep this to a half an hour. So the term panspermia is the term for the fact that when the concept of life was created by the one, the creator in the center of our galaxy and other galaxies, but we're talking about our galaxy because we're talking about life on Earth. We don't want to get lost here. That's what often a lot of people do. They want to get lost. Oh, there's more? No, yeah, but we haven't even gotten straight here yet. So we use the term panspermia. Now we know it's sperm. So sperm would go out and then fertilize in this area. Pan is all. So within this panspermia was the ability for any kind of life to emerge from any system, depending on what kind of ecosystem it fell into, so that it could unfold within. So this would be why we have different kinds of life forms in our own galaxy, because the panspermia landed in different environments and unfolded in different processes. Similarly, supposedly the Anunnaki are reptilian. So what we might have had is just like we see a progression on our own planet from insects, then into like, amphibians, reptilians, mammals, and then of course into us, of which we are part of the mammal group. But we basically had a catastrophe that basically wiped the dinosaurs out, or so it seems. Now we can, but the mammals survived. So in other words, the mammals were able to continue to develop, and so the dominant ensouling species became human or a mammal. In other worlds, like in the case of the reptilian, they might have had a catastrophe. So since the reptilian process wasn't interrupted, the dominant life force then became reptilian. And then when we hear of, let's just give Simon Parkes the possibility that there are insect type like the mantids, and in which case what we might have had in certain situations, the insects actually are able to develop to the part where they can carry that kind of intelligence. And then so you can see it's very much about environment. And that's what panspermia does. Okay. So when I tune in, but panspermia is like, blah, 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 blah. That can be a little bit much to swallow. But what Gordon White was talking about with regards to the panspermia was the Mimi virus. And apparently there's even a big one called the Mama virus. Are we hearing anything that is saying mama to us? So let me bring this picture up, okay? Here's what the Mimi virus looks like. It's an icosahedron. And if you look over here, you're going to see like these little tendrils. In many ways, what these would be are antennae, or the ability for what's inside this. It's got a casing like a virus, and viruses are known to be able to survive almost any kind of conditions, including interstellar conditions, which would make sense because if you're at the center of the galaxy and you're going to spread something out across the galactic arms, this panspermia would have to be able to survive interstellar space until it settled and either found a place to propagate or didn't. And of course, propagating would require a food source, whether that's gamma rays, space debris, or landing in a place like Earth. And originally Earth had no oxygen. The original cyanobacteria ultimately did not have oxygen. When oxygen developed, then whole species died off because now they had a new way of respiration. But this is all progression. And all of this ability to adapt is in this little package. It is my contention that these little filaments are actually the way that when this lands into any environment, it can sense what's in its environment, so that you might not be. Let me see if I'm going to make this a little bit bigger and hope it doesn't go out of the screen. Okay, let me come back here and see if that, yeah. So I'm just going to read it from the screen. And so what we have is there's what they call DNA virus, 90% coding capacity, 10% junk DNA, and then the base pairs, protein coding genes, additional genes, sugar, lipid, amino acid metabolism. So rather than your typical virus, which is basically, in a way, parasitic because it needs a host. In other words, it wants to grow, but it can't grow on its own. So it needs to inject itself into a host and then use the host to grow it. Well, this has enough in it to actually turn itself into a microbe. And I would say that 10% junk DNA is the DNA that is not yet coded because it doesn't know the environment that it might need to code for to exploit. And these little filaments are part of it getting data from its environment to know what to do. And then basically what this does is it unpacks itself and is able to form into a micro. In other words, this can unpack itself and unpack in a way that it configures itself so that when it opens that protective carapace, it can begin exploiting the environment and whatever food source is there and propagating itself like an amoeba. The full name of this, I kind of can't say it, is, Acanthamoeba polyphaga mimivirus. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because to put out a concept like panspermia, I'm going to talk and let you look at this for a bit, because that's an icosahedron. And a concept like panspermia is something that might be kind of nebulous. And like, what is this panspermia? How, whatever. So now if we look at something like this, we can see, this is how they could, in plasma streams, shoot out from the galactic center, the central sun, through ejecta, put this stuff out into the galactic arms, and then allow it to settle. And then based on the environment, it begins to unfold, first at the microbe level, and then it starts colony cells, and then you start building up into organisms, just like it did on Earth. And this might sound, that sounds like science, like evolution versus creation. Once again, with panspermia, what you get is that evolution is part of its process, but it starts with the intelligence of the creator putting it, and again, this is how it can develop in all kinds of environments. So when we look back at it again, now, if you are familiar at all with the concept of a Merkaba, if you turn this thing, set it up right, and it's funny, it's almost tilted like at an Earth axis tilt there. But if you recall, a Merkaba is, basically something like the Star of David, but they spin. And they spin in opposite directions, and ultimately what you would have is something that looks like that. So in that shape, we can also see kind of a Merkaba shape, which would be a hexagon. And that's, if you look at this again, you'll see that if you were to kind of put that just right, you would have a six-sided figure, okay, which is what a hexagon is. So part of this is to try and get us to be able to interpret with our left brain and not just make it a belief system. It's like, he's got a new belief. Did you, I think I believe I don't want you to believe what I believe. I want you to have gnosis about this. I want you to kind of like take it inside, check it with your heart, your own wisdom, pray on it, meditate on it, however you want, and see, are we starting to see how things unfolded in the galaxy, and of course across the greater universe made up of multiple galaxies, billions of galaxies. Andromeda, by the way, is a separate galaxy. It's not part of the Milky Way galaxy. Now, where else do I want to go here? I have to look over here. Okay. Now, there's a couple of really wild things by Gordon White, and I don't know how far I want to get there. What I want to do is just show where our belief systems were. In other words, how old what is considered the Sophianic narrative of what later became known as the Gnostics came about. So let me just kind of cue up some things here. Come back here, transition. So here we have some quote-unquote Venuses. Okay. Now, who named them Venuses? The archaeologists. And of course, later when you finally start getting into the Greek stuff, they would call them Venuses. But if you can see, let me see if I can make those a little bit larger for you. Scroll this up. Okay. Make it a little bit bigger. And see if I can't get it in here so you can see them. But I'm pretty sure you're familiar with these Venuses. And, and in most cases, this is a later one, but in most cases, there's no face on them. In some cases, even no head. And these are hardly aesthetic. These are a rendition of how we perceived the indwelling intelligence of Gaia, or our mother. So these are mother figurines. These are not Venuses. These are Earths. These are Gaias. Or, and we'll leave it at Gaia, because there's a Gaia, Sophia, kind of Gaia is the planet, and Sophia or Sophia is the wisdom or the intelligence that lives within our living planet and is the intelligence behind Mother Nature. So the other thing we want to look at here now is, okay, so how far back does some of this go? Oh, that's the virus again. Let's look at some of these years here. The oldest one is between 35 and 40,000 years ago in Germany. Then in Austria was one of 30,000. So if you can just look at some of these numbers, 23,000, 24,000, to 35 as a minimum, and to 40. What's the point we're trying to make here? That basically the wisdom of what later gets called the Gnostics goes back 35 or 40,000 years. This were our original, how we understood where we came from and where our culture derived from. So that's why I get a little bit upset. Not upset, a little bit like, oh man, you're missing the mark when they speak about the narrative that is garbled, but still kind of, you can parse it out of the Gnostic writings of the 1st century AD. They make it sound as if like, this belief system is like 2,000 years old, roughly, when it really has its roots about 35 to 40,000 years old. So that belief system was the extant belief system on this planet for most of our time on this planet. And it's not until, a few thousand years ago that the new thought system came, or the paratrix, patrix, but not the matrix. The matrix is the mother. And thought crimes arose. And in the Gnostic writings, we see people trying to live in an environment where they can hold on to their old wisdom without getting stoned or burnt for it. I mean, the burnings went on into Protestant Germany. It was during the Protestant Reformation that the Germans burnt endless amounts of women who kept the old ways. And, the Protestant made the Catholic Inquisition look like a practice session for what they were going to do. And what was it about? Thought crimes, heresies, all right, for what you believed. And if you think that being killed for what you believe isn't the utmost tyranny and evil, maybe you want to look a little deeper inside yourself and check with your heart. I'm because I'm going to be using certain terms as I try and get us to reclaim who we are, not only on this planet, but at least in this galaxy, and what we need to wake up with. And everybody's familiar with the movie The Matrix, about the false reality. Well, again, in typical Hollywood fashion, they call the original natural non-digital or fake reality, they're calling it the Matrix, when I'm calling it the Patrix, but I like paratrix, as in parasitic. But basically it is, Patrix is a little bit better, and I would really like to, I'm hoping to insert it in more and more, because I now use the word Patrix. I don't use the word Matrix. Matrix is the mother. And that isn't, we're not stuck in the Matrix, we're stuck in the Patrix and their laws, and the laws that allow for thought crimes and penalties for having your own belief system about who we are and where we came from. That's the Patrix. That is the prison that we're in. And we're not going to really be able to move ahead as a species and reclaim our heritage until we realize what the real trap is. And the trap largely is a legal system. I mean, even one of the first quote-unquote legal systems it came from Hammurabi in around Did I had that queued up. Let's say 1700 BC roughly. It wasn't called the Laws of Hammurabi. It was called the Code of Hammurabi. And there was certain, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth type stuff. And then they had things for like marriages. I mean, kind of like the beginning of the Patrix. But even then, they weren't called laws. It was called a code. I guess it was code for what was coming. Because again, before the laws, we had ways. And that's what we hear in the Tao, the way. And I'm always going to make these points because part of our being able to see clearly is we need to reprogram ourselves. Much of the programming has come via words, so we're going to use words to dispel the spell. And part of that is by words that have common usage, knowing what they mean, like heresy really means choice. So and so again, heresy, we're not, crime against, but choice is a crime. In whose system would choice be a crime? Now, if that choice resulted in an action in your community that nobody liked, we might have a crime. But to speak a thought to be a crime? Come on. Can we all admit something is really wrong with that system? Really fucking wrong with that system? So what do I... Oh, okay, I'm at the half an hour. So, now a brother that I love dearly had coined a phrase, and I like it. It's called love for all and hatred for none. And everybody kind of gets the love for all, but even when you do that, they go, love for everybody and hatred. And then they even say, well, if you say love for all, you don't have to say hatred for none. Well, you kind of have to reinforce it. But I want to get that nuance because this would allow us to unpack that. It's almost like, to put it in a kind of a patrixy kind of language, would be love the sinner, hate the sin. But ultimately, how I see it and how we can do it is, and how we can actually find some, righteous anger and possibly even hatred for systems and for institutions. We can hate the systems that imprison us. We can hate the institutions that create things like thought crimes, debt systems. And so for me, we can hate the system. The only system that we should belong as part of is our ecosystem. The ecosystem is the only system that because that is what embraces us, and that doesn't have a debt. Just think about it. In our ecosystem, we have beautiful Mother Nature and her abundance. Okay? I mean, we even see it in humans. If a woman has a child, and of course, if somebody has too many children in a row before the body recovers, there can be it can be taxing. But in a normal procedure, if a baby is born, and especially after the first baby, the mother isn't less. In other words, there's no debt from producing something new, because the system is not our system, our ecosystem isn't built on debt. The Patrix is built on debt. And so, again, an apple tree. How many seeds are in an apple? So how many more trees can produce how many more apples? Do you see how abundant the real system we live in is? Even, like I said, even down to us being able, 2 people can produce how many more? And did the father shrink from putting out sperm? Did the mother shrink from putting out babies? Was there any debt? No, because the natural system is abundance. The Creator gives and gives and gives and gives. And it builds itself out through that propagation. The systems and institutions of the Patrix take and take and take. They want to take taxes. They want to take our creativity. basically, the whole matrix is based on parasitizing the matrix. The matrix gives, the mother gives and builds out. And of course, yes, of course, there's we can see in our, for a mother to get pregnant, she needs a father to impregnate her. I mean, it is built on mother and father. But in the kind of matrix we have, what do we see is take and take and take. Our monetary system is one that is built on debt. So we for us to get free, we're going to have to, for us to understand where in nature we arise from, and the abundance and the propagation and the building out and the unfolding and the unpacking and the growing. That's the natural system. The unnatural system sucks life, money, work, thought. Okay? You have to unpack this stuff if we're going to move forward to free ourselves from we have to free ourselves psychologically before we can actually free ourselves from the situations and the institutions. And that comes through wisdom. Because we can all find common cause in wisdom. We can all find common cause in Sophia. And I think that'll be the my end. Remember, I'll close it with love for all, hatred for none. And that means what is living, what is real, and what is of the Creator. Love what is of the Creator. Don't hate what is of the Creator. But the systems that are not of the Creator, the systems that parasitize off of the Creator, we can hate that. We can hate the systems. You might go, what about the man who runs the system? Nope. Because if there's no system, the man that man you might want to hate is powerless. It's the system. And it's the people that get sucked into that system and then get that kind of DNA put into their psychology, where now, rather than operating as one of us in our natural system, they operate as one of them because they got hired. And why did they get hired? Because we needed money. Why did we get money? Because somebody decided that owning land and then charging you to live on it was given us for free. See, even the whole idea of land ownership is part of the system, part of the matrix. And we don't have to go deep into antiquity to find it. We can go a couple hundred years ago when the Europeans landed here. And we can go maybe to a reservation and talk to them. How was it here before the Europeans went? What was this land ownership? We didn't have land ownership. We moved around. I mean, once we set up, and if somebody came into our system and wanted to make trouble, there might be some whooping and a skull crushing, but that was protecting, ourselves from that. It wasn't organized war, but there was no concept of land ownership. So once land got owned, and like even like in Robin Hood, you couldn't hunt the king's deer. In other words, it was illegal to hunt deer to feed yourself because the king claimed nature. Do you understand how parasitic and tyrannical the system is? So it's not, we have to come to grips with these systems, these institutions, understand that, we have our brothers and sisters who are part of those institutions, but we have to love them, and the best thing we have to work on reclaiming them. But we'll be more effective at reclaiming them once we get ourselves clear and our own behaviors demonstrate how healthy we are because we're clear, and how happy we can be. We have a lot of work to do, but it starts with freeing ourselves from these institutions, from these parasitic systems. Okay, and I'll end it with once more, love for all, hatred for none. All right? And so my love to you all, stay as sane as you can. It's going to be, it's already getting crazier by the day. We have a crazy couple of months ahead of us. And I think things will start breaking and fall a little bit, but even that breaking will be crazy times. So this is why we now want to find common cause in our wisdom, and so that we can kind of find that center that we're going to need and have a contact with each other, and also do our best to find out who we can communicate locally, just in case we lose this modern form of telepathy. And that's another subject, and I'm going to end that here at 40 minutes. Love you all. See you next time.